The first shot rang out just as Ruby Daniels stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Laredo, Texas. The year was 1875, and as the crowd scattered in panic, she stood frozen, her emerald eyes wide with fear as her carefully planned new beginning erupted into chaos around her. "Get down, madam." A strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her to the ground behind a wooden water trough as more gunfire erupted along the main street. Ruby found herself pressed against the chest of a tall stranger, his sun-weathered face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. His blue eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the street while keeping her protectively behind him. "Thank you," she managed to say, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I hardly expected such a welcome to Laredo." "Town's usually more hospitable," the man replied, his voice low and gravelly. "Name's Samuel Hayes. Most folks call me Sam." Another shot cracked through the air, splintering wood just inches from their shelter. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hayes," Ruby said with surprising composure, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Though I might have preferred different circumstances." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough, stay low now." In the distance, shouts of "He's down" and "Got him" echoed through the street, followed by the thunder of boots on wooden boardwalks. "Looks like they caught whoever was causing the trouble," Sam said, cautiously peering over the trough. "Who's they?" Ruby asked, brushing dust from her traveling dress. "Sheriff and his deputies. Been trying to catch the Blackwell gang for months. Seems they finally cornered one of them." Sam stood, offering her his hand. "Guess that's one way to see your first Laredo gunfight, Miss Daniels, Ruby Daniels." She accepted his hand, noticing the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. "I've come to take over my uncle's mercantile." Sam's eyebrows rose slightly. "Abe Daniels was your uncle. Good man. Town took it hard when he passed." "I never had the chance to meet him," Ruby admitted, finally taking in her surroundings as the street began to return to normal. "He and my father weren't on speaking terms. I only learned of his passing and my inheritance 3 weeks ago." Sam nodded, then tipped his hat. "Well, Miss Daniels, welcome to Laredo. It ain't always this exciting, but it's never dull." With the danger past, Ruby noticed for the first time the lean, muscular build of her rescuer. Sam Hayes stood over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that tapered to a narrow waist. His faded blue shirt had seen better days, as had his worn leather vest and dusty boots. But there was something in his bearing, a quiet confidence that put her at ease despite the alarming introduction to her new home. "The mercantile's just down the way," Sam said, gesturing down the street. "I can escort you if you'd like." "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Hayes." As they walked, townsfolk emerged from doorways and behind barrels, nodding respectfully at Sam and casting curious glances at Ruby. A few women whispered behind their hands, their eyes following the pair down the street. "Don't mind them," Sam said quietly. "New faces are rare enough in Laredo." A beautiful woman arriving alone is bound to set tongues wagging. Ruby felt her cheeks warm at his casual compliment. "And what about you, Mr. Hayes? What brings you to Laredo?" A shadow passed over his face. "Been here about 8 months. I ranch outside of town. Small spread, nothing fancy." Before Ruby could inquire further, they reached a sturdy 2-story building with Daniels Mercantile painted in fading letters across the front. Through the windows, Ruby could see shelves of goods and a counter running along the back wall. "This is it," Sam said, stepping onto the boardwalk. "Your uncle lived in the rooms above the store. Keys should be with Josiah Parker at the bank." "Thank you," Ruby said, suddenly feeling the weight of her decision to come west. "For everything." Sam studied her for a moment, as if seeing beyond her composed exterior to the uncertainty beneath. "Town's decent folk, mostly. You'll find your footing soon enough." He hesitated, then added, "I ride in most Saturdays for supplies. If you need anything before then, the Hayes Ranch is about 5 miles north." With a final tip of his hat, Sam turned and walked toward the livery stable, leaving Ruby to face her new life alone. The interior of Daniel's mercantile smelled of coffee, leather, and the faint sweetness of candies in glass jars. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows, and Ruby ran her fingers along the counter, feeling an unexpected connection to the uncle she'd never known. "Well," she said aloud to the empty store, "this is home now." After securing the keys from the banker, a thin, bespectacled man who seemed both surprised and pleased to meet Abe's niece, Ruby spent the afternoon exploring her inheritance. The living quarters above the store were simply furnished but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a small sitting room, and a kitchen that overlooked the alley behind the building. As daylight faded, Ruby lit oil lamps and sat at the kitchen table with her uncle's ledgers, trying to make sense of the business she had inherited. According to the books, the mercantile was profitable, though not extravagantly so. The neatly recorded transactions revealed a man who had been methodical and fair in his dealings. A knock at the store's front door startled her from her calculations. Ruby descended the stairs cautiously, lamp in hand. "Who's there?" she called through the door. "It's Eliza Morgan, dear. I've brought you some supper." Ruby opened the door to find a plump, gray-haired woman holding a covered basket. The smell of fresh bread and stew made Ruby's stomach growl, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since morning. "I'm sorry to intrude," Eliza said, stepping inside when Ruby beckoned her, "but I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal after your journey." "That's very kind of you," Ruby said, genuinely touched. "Please come upstairs." Over supper, Ruby learned that Eliza was the widow of the town doctor and had been a friend to her uncle. "Abe mentioned you in his letters," Eliza said, pouring tea, "though he never expected you'd come to Laredo." "I'm not sure he'd have wanted me to," Ruby admitted, breaking off a piece of bread. "My father made it clear they had some falling out years ago." Eliza's kind face grew thoughtful. "Brothers can be stubborn creatures, but Abe always kept that photograph of you on his dresser." "The one from when you were, perhaps 16, Ruby looked up in surprise. "He had a photograph of me," said you reminded him of your mother. Eliza sipped her tea. "Now tell me about your encounter with Sam Hayes." "The whole town's talking about how he rushed to your rescue during the shooting." "It wasn't quite as dramatic as all that," Ruby protested, but found herself recounting the events of her arrival nonetheless. "Sam's not one for grand gestures," Eliza agreed. "Keeps to himself mostly. But he's a good man, even if he carries more shadows than most." "Shadows?" Ruby couldn't help her curiosity. "Not my story to tell, dear." Eliza patted Ruby's hand. "But if you're looking for someone to help you get the mercantile back in running order, you could do worse than asking Sam Hayes." After Eliza left, Ruby found herself standing before the small mirror in her bedroom, wondering what Sam had seen when he looked at her. At 23, she was no longer the fresh-faced girl who had once dreamed of adventure. The past 5 years as a schoolteacher in Boston had taught her practicality, if not cynicism. Shaking off such thoughts, Ruby unpinned her auburn hair, letting it fall in waves past her shoulders. Tomorrow would be soon enough to worry about reopening the mercantile. Tonight, she would rest and prepare for whatever challenges her new life would bring. The following morning, Ruby rose with the sun, determined to begin setting the store to rights. She had just finished sweeping the front boardwalk when a wagon pulled up, driven by a man about her own age. "Miss Daniels," he called, jumping down. "I'm Thomas Wilson. My father runs the freight company. We've got a shipment here that was ordered by your uncle before he passed." Oh, Ruby set aside her broom. I wasn't expecting any deliveries. Thomas grinned, revealing a boyish charm. Well, these goods have been sitting in our warehouse for nearly 2 months. Dad figured you might want them now that you're here to open the store again. With Thomas's help, Ruby spent the morning unloading crates of dry goods, tools, fabric, and various sundries. By noon, the store was looking considerably more stocked, though Ruby knew she had days of organizing ahead of her. That should do it, Thomas said, placing the last crate behind the counter. Dad said to tell you that the next regular shipment is due in 2 weeks. Please thank your father for me, Ruby said, wiping dust from her hands. And thank you for your help. Thomas lingered, clearly wanting to say something more. Finally, he blurted, "Some of us younger folks gather at the Peterson place on Saturday evenings, dancing mostly. You'd be welcome to join us." Ruby smiled, touched by the friendly invitation. "That's very kind. Perhaps once I've got the store in order." After Thomas left, Ruby continued her work, stopping only when hunger forced her to prepare a simple lunch. She was in the middle of arranging tins of coffee on a shelf when the bell over the door jingled. "We're not quite open yet," she began, turning, then stopped when she saw Sam Hayes standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Didn't come to shop," he said, stepping inside. His eyes took in the partially organized shelves and open crates. "Heard you were settling in." "News travels fast," Ruby observed, climbing down from her stepladder. "Small town." Sam glanced around the store. "Looks like you've been busy." "Mr. Wilson delivered some stock this morning." "I'm trying to make sense of what's here and what I'll need to order." Sam nodded, shifting his weight slightly. He seemed less at ease within the confines of the store than he had been during yesterday's chaos. "Thought you might need a hand with some of the heavier items." Ruby considered his offer, remembering Eliza's words about Sam being a good man despite his shadows. Whatever his past held, his steady presence was reassuring. "I would appreciate the help," she decided. "Though I can't pay much." Wasn't asking for payment. His blue eyes met hers directly. "Just being neighborly." For the next few hours, they worked together in companionable silence, interrupted only by Ruby's occasional directions. Sam moved the heavier crates and assembled shelving units with efficient, practiced movements. Ruby found herself watching his hands, strong, capable hands that handled rough wood with surprising gentleness. "What made you decide to come to Laredo?" Sam asked eventually, driving a nail into a loose floorboard. "Must have been a big change from wherever you were before." "Boston," Ruby replied, arranging spools of thread by color. "I was teaching at a girls' school there. When I received the letter about Uncle Abe's passing and the inheritance, it seemed like an opportunity." "For what?" Ruby paused, surprised by the directness of his question. "For a different kind of life, I suppose. After my father died last year, there wasn't much keeping me in Boston." Sam studied her for a moment, then nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Fresh starts have their appeal. Is that what brought you to Laredo, a fresh start?" His face closed off slightly. "Something like that." Ruby sensed she'd ventured onto unwelcome ground and changed the subject. "How large is your ranch?" The tension in Sam's shoulders eased. "About 200 acres. Not much by Texas standards, but enough for my small herd and some crops." "You run it alone?" "Got a hand who helps with the cattle. Miguel Fuentes. Good man." Sam hammered another nail with more force than necessary. "Between us, we manage." By late afternoon, the store had taken on a more organized appearance. Ruby stood in the center, hands on her hips, surveying their work with satisfaction. "It's starting to look like a proper mercantile again," she said. "I couldn't have done this much without your help." Sam replaced his hat, preparing to leave. "I'll be back tomorrow to fix that leak in the storeroom roof. Need to get some tar first." You don't have to. Storm's coming in 2 days. Better to fix it now than deal with water damage later. His tone brooked no argument. Thank you, Ruby said simply. Then impulsively she added, would you stay for supper? It's the least I can offer after all your help. Sam hesitated, and for a moment Ruby thought he would refuse. Then he nodded once. Need to see to my horse first. I'll be back in an hour. True to his word, Sam returned as the sun was setting, his tall frame silhouetted in the doorway of the mercantile. Ruby had spent the intervening time preparing a meal from the supplies Eliza had brought and what she could find in the pantry. Hope you like chicken and dumplings, she said, leading him upstairs to the small apartment. Been a while since I had a home-cooked meal, Sam admitted, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. His hair, freed from the hat, was dark brown with hints of gold where the sun had lightened it. In the warm glow of the oil lamps, the kitchen felt cozy rather than cramped. Ruby served the food and they ate in silence for a few minutes, the quiet broken only by the clink of silverware against plates. This is good, Sam said finally. Really good. My mother taught me to cook, Ruby replied, pleased by his approval. Said a woman should know how to feed herself properly, regardless of whether she ever married. Smart woman, she was. Ruby refilled his glass with water. She died when I was 18, influenza. Sam's eyes softened with understanding. Lost my mother young too. Different circumstances, though. Ruby waited, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he asked about her plans for the mercantile, and they spent the remainder of the meal discussing business matters. Sam knew the needs of the local ranchers and farmers, offering insights into what goods might sell best. After they'd finished eating, Sam insisted on helping with the dishes despite Ruby's protests. Standing side by side at the small sink, their arms occasionally brushing, Ruby felt an awareness of him that went beyond mere gratitude for his help. Town will be glad to have the store open again, Sam said as he dried a plate. Having to ride all the way to San Antonio for supplies was wearing thin. I hope to be ready by the end of next week, Ruby said, though I'll need to order more inventory once I've taken proper stock. I can help with that too if you want. Sam set the dried plate on the shelf. I'll be in town tomorrow anyway. Ruby turned to face him, suddenly curious about this man who had appeared so unexpectedly in her life. Mr. Hayes, Sam, he corrected. If we're going to be working together, might as well use my given name. Sam, she amended, liking the way it felt to say it. Why are you helping me? You hardly know me. He was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes studying her face as if searching for something. Your uncle helped me once, he finally said. When I first came to town, gave me credit at the store when I was short on cash, pointed me toward the ranch when it came up for sale. He shrugged slightly. Figure I owe him, and the town needs this mercantile. Ruby sensed there was more to his story, but she didn't press. Well, whatever your reasons, I'm grateful. Sam nodded, then glanced out the window at the darkening sky. Should get going. Got chores to finish before turning in. At the door he paused, looking down at her with an unreadable expression. Lock up tight behind me, he said. Laredo's mostly safe, but best to be careful. I will, Ruby promised. After Sam left, Ruby found herself standing at the window, watching his tall figure disappear down the street toward the livery stable. There was something about Samuel Hayes that intrigued her, a depth beneath his quiet exterior that she couldn't quite fathom. True to his word, Sam returned the next day with supplies to fix the leaking roof. Ruby worked below in the store, listening to his footsteps overhead as he made the repairs. By mid-afternoon, he declared the job finished. Should hold through any storms now, he said, wiping tar from his hands with a rag. Anything else need fixing before I head out? Ruby hesitated, then said, "Actually, I was wondering if you might help me move some of the heavier furniture upstairs. I'd like to rearrange the bedroom." Sam followed her up to the apartment, where Ruby showed him the massive oak bedstead that dominated the main bedroom. "Uncle Abe must have been fond of substantial furniture," she commented as they struggled to shift the bed to the opposite wall. "This weighs a ton." "Abe was a practical man," Sam replied, his voice slightly strained with effort. "Built things to last." With the bed finally positioned to Ruby's satisfaction, they stood back to survey their work. The room looked more balanced now, with the window casting afternoon light across the freshly made bed. "That's much better," Ruby said. "Thank you." Sam nodded, then frowned slightly as his gaze fell on a small daguerreotype on the dresser. "Didn't realize you had that." Ruby picked up the photograph, a portrait of a serious-looking young girl with auburn braids. "Eliza mentioned that Uncle Abe kept a picture of me. I found it in his desk drawer." Sam's expression softened. "He was proud of you, even if he never said so directly." "Did you know him well?" Ruby asked, carefully replacing the photograph. "Well enough." Sam's eyes met hers. "He talked about his niece in Boston, said she had her mother's spirit and her father's stubborn streak." Ruby laughed softly. "That sounds like an accurate assessment." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town below. Ruby became acutely aware of how alone they were in the apartment and how close Sam stood. He seemed to realize it too, taking a step back and clearing his throat. "I should get going," he said. "Got supplies to pick up before heading back to the ranch?" "Of course." Ruby followed him downstairs to the store. "Will I see you tomorrow?" Sam paused at the door. "Not tomorrow. Need to check the south fence line. Probably be Saturday before I'm back in town." Ruby nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Saturday, then." As the week progressed, Ruby threw herself into organizing the store, creating an inventory list, and planning what new stock to order. Each day brought curious visitors, townspeople who came ostensibly to welcome her, but clearly wanted to assess Abraham Daniels' niece for themselves. Eliza Morgan proved to be a valuable friend, introducing Ruby to the town's prominent citizens and filling her in on local history and gossip. Through these conversations, Ruby learned more about her uncle, his reputation for fairness, his occasional gruffness, and his generosity during hard times. But it was Sam Hayes who occupied her thoughts most frequently. Despite their brief acquaintance, she found herself watching the door, half expecting to see his tall figure appear despite his statement that he wouldn't return until Saturday. "You've made remarkable progress," Eliza commented on Friday afternoon as she helped Ruby price a new shipment of fabric. "The store looks almost ready to open." "I'm aiming for Monday," Ruby replied, tying a neat label to a bolt of calico. "Though I'll need to restock some items soon." Eliza gave her a knowing look. "I expect Sam Hayes will be helpful with that. He seems quite invested in your success." Ruby felt a blush creep up her neck. "Mr. Hayes has been neighborly, that's all." "Is it?" Eliza's eyes twinkled. "I've known Sam since he arrived in Laredo, and I've never seen him spend so much time in town before." Before Ruby could formulate a response, the bell over the door jingled. Both women turned to see Thomas Wilson enter, his arms laden with parcels. "Afternoon, ladies," he greeted them cheerfully. "Got a special delivery from San Antonio. Thought you might need these supplies sooner rather than later, Miss Daniels." "That's very thoughtful," Ruby said, helping him place the parcels on the counter. "Though I wasn't expecting anything from San Antonio," Thomas grinned. "Actually, these were ordered yesterday, paid for too." Ruby frowned in confusion. "But I didn't, Sam Hayes did," Thomas explained. "Asked Dad to fetch these items specifically when he made the supply run." said they were essential for getting the store ready to open. Ruby opened one of the parcels to find ledger books, ink, and a box of pencils, exactly what she needed to properly establish the bookkeeping system. "Well," Eliza said with a satisfied smile, "isn't that interesting?" After Thomas left, promising to return for the dance the following evening, Eliza gave Ruby a significant look. "Still think Sam is just being neighborly?" Ruby ran her fingers over the fine leather binding of the new ledgers. "It's a kind gesture, but, Ruby Daniels, for an educated woman, you can be remarkably dense," Eliza chided gently. "That man didn't ride all the way to my house in the rain last night just to ask what supplies a mercantile might need." "He came to see you?" Ruby asked, surprised. "Said he wanted my womanly opinion on what items might be useful to you." Eliza's eyes softened. "I've never seen Sam Hayes so concerned about anyone's welfare before." Ruby didn't know how to respond to this revelation. The image of Sam riding through rain to ensure she had what she needed for the store stirred feelings she wasn't prepared to examine too closely. "Speaking of Sam," Eliza continued, "will he be escorting you to the dance tomorrow?" "He hasn't asked," Ruby said, then added hastily, "and I'm not sure I'll attend anyway. There's still so much to do here." Eliza patted her hand. "All work and no play makes for a dull life, my dear. The whole town will be there. It's a chance to meet people under more relaxed circumstances." After Eliza left, Ruby found herself staring at the parcels Sam had arranged for her, wondering about the man who seemed determined to ease her transition to life in Laredo. Saturday dawned clear and bright, with the promise of heat later in the day. Ruby spent the morning arranging the final displays and calculating prices for her goods. By noon, she was satisfied that the store would be ready to open on Monday. She was sweeping the boardwalk when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Sam rode toward the mercantile on a magnificent chestnut gelding, leading a second horse, a dappled gray mare, beside him. "Afternoon," he greeted her, swinging down from the saddle with fluid grace. He looked different today, Ruby realized. He'd shaved, and his clothes, while still practical, were newer and less worn than his usual attire. "Hello, Sam," she replied, her pulse quickening inexplicably. "I didn't expect to see you so early. Finished the fence line yesterday." He glanced at the storefront. "Place is looking good." "Ready to open Monday," Ruby confirmed. "Thanks in part to your help including the supplies from San Antonio." Sam looked slightly embarrassed. "Figured you'd need proper business materials." "It was thoughtful of you." Ruby leaned the broom against the wall. "Would you like to come in?" "I've made iced tea." As they sat at the small table in the store's back room, Ruby noticed that Sam seemed unusually tense, his fingers drumming lightly on the tabletop. "Everything all right?" she asked. He nodded, took a breath, then said, "Heard about the dance tonight at the Petersons'." "Yes, Thomas mentioned it," Ruby replied. "Eliza thinks I should attend." "Smart woman, Eliza." Sam's eyes met hers. "Thought you might like to ride out there with me. It's a fair distance to walk, especially for a lady in evening clothes." Ruby felt a flutter of anticipation. "Are you asking to escort me to the dance, Mr. Hayes?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Trying to, though apparently not very successfully." "I'd be delighted," Ruby said, unable to suppress her own smile. "Though I should warn you, I haven't danced in quite some time." "That makes two of us." Sam's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Brought Daisy with me, the gray mare. She's gentle, good for a lady rider. Thought you might like to try her out on the ride to the Petersons'." "You brought me a horse?" Ruby asked, surprised. "Just to borrow," Sam clarified quickly. "Figure you'll need a way to get around if you're staying in Laredo." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Ruby deeply. "Thank you. I'd love to ride her." They agreed that Sam would return at 6 to escort her to the dance. After he left, Ruby found herself facing an unexpected dilemma what to wear. She hadn't packed many social outfits, assuming life in Laredo would offer few opportunities for formal gatherings. Eventually, she settled on her best dress, a deep green silk that brought out the color of her eyes. It wasn't the height of Boston fashion, but it was well made and becoming. As she arranged her hair, pinning the auburn waves into a simple but elegant style, Ruby admitted to herself that she cared very much about how she would look to Sam Hayes. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at the store's front door. Ruby took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and went downstairs. Sam stood on the boardwalk, hat in hand. He'd exchanged his work clothes for dark trousers, a clean white shirt, and a black vest. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his blue eyes widened slightly as they took in her appearance. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." Ruby felt a blush warm her cheeks. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Hayes." The ride to the Peterson farm gave Ruby a chance to see the countryside surrounding Laredo. The evening light cast a golden glow over the rolling landscape, and the air was heavy with the scent of sage and wildflowers. Daisy proved to be exactly as Sam had described, gentle and responsive to Ruby's commands. "She suits you," Sam observed as they rode side by side. "You've ridden before." "My grandfather had a farm outside Boston," Ruby explained. "I spent summers there as a child." Nothing as vast as Texas, but enough to learn horsemanship. Sam nodded approvingly. "Good skill to have out here. Distances are greater than back east." The Peterson farm came into view as they crested a small hill, a sprawling ranch house with lanterns already glowing in the windows. Several wagons and horses were tied outside, and the sound of fiddle music drifted through the evening air. "Looks like half the county's here," Sam commented as he helped Ruby dismount. Inside, the Petersons' large barn had been transformed into a dance hall, with hay bales arranged around the edges for seating and lanterns hanging from the rafters. A small group of musicians played lively tunes on a fiddle, banjo, and harmonica, while couples twirled in the center. Ruby was immediately introduced to what seemed like dozens of people, their names and faces blurring together in a whirl of welcoming smiles and curious glances. She caught fragments of conversation around her. Abe Daniels' niece, from Boston, reopening the Mercantile. Sam stayed close to her side, his steady presence reassuring in the sea of strangers. When the musicians struck up a waltz, he turned to her with a questioning look. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his hand. Ruby placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the dance floor. For a man who claimed to be out of practice, Sam moved with surprising grace, his hand warm and firm at her waist as he guided her through the steps. "You dance very well for a rancher," Ruby observed, looking up into his face. A shadow crossed his features. "Wasn't always a rancher." Before she could ask what he meant, the music changed tempo, and they were swept into a livelier dance that required all their concentration. For the next hour, Ruby found herself passed between various partners as the townsfolk made sure the newcomer felt welcome. She danced with Thomas Wilson, with the banker Josiah Parker, with the sheriff's deputy, and with several ranchers whose names she couldn't recall. But her eyes kept finding Sam, who stood watching from the edge of the dance floor, his expression unreadable in the lantern light. When she finally returned to his side, flushed and slightly breathless from the exertion, Ruby was acutely aware of the glances and whispers that followed them. "I seem to be the subject of considerable interest," she murmured. "It's not just you there watching," Sam replied, his voice low. "Not many folks have seen me at a social gathering before." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Are you such a recluse then, more or less. Sam's gaze swept the room. Prefer my own company most days. Yet here you are, Ruby observed. Sam's eyes returned to her face. Here I am. The simple statement carried a weight that made Ruby's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, Eliza appeared at her elbow, her kind face alight with pleasure. You two make a handsome couple, she declared without preamble. And Ruby, everyone is so looking forward to the mercantile reopening. You've already made quite an impression. The evening continued with more dancing, plentiful food, and friendly conversation. Ruby found herself genuinely enjoying the company of her new neighbors, their straightforward manners a refreshing change from the often artificial social niceties of Boston society. As the night wore on, she noticed that while Sam was reserved with most people, he seemed to relax in her company. They discovered a shared love of books, and Sam surprised her with his knowledge of literature. Didn't expect a Texas rancher to have read Dickens, Ruby teased as they sat on hay bales during a break in the dancing. Man's got to do something during the long winter evenings, Sam replied with a hint of a smile. Books are good company when the north wind's howling. The musicians had just begun another waltz when Thomas Wilson approached, clearly intending to claim Ruby for another dance. Sam rose to his feet, but before Thomas could speak, a commotion at the barn entrance drew everyone's attention. A group of riders had arrived, their spurs jingling as they swaggered into the barn. Ruby recognized the sheriff among them, but the others were strangers, hard-faced men whose presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Trouble, Sam muttered, his body tensing beside her. What is it? Ruby asked, sensing his sudden alertness. Before he could answer, one of the newcomers spotted them and nudged his companion. Well, look what we have here. Sam Hayes actually showing his face in public. The man who spoke was tall and lean, with a weathered face and cold eyes that reminded Ruby of a snake. He wore his gun belt low on his hips, the holster tied down the mark of a man who drew his weapon frequently and with deadly intent. Blackwell, Sam acknowledged, his voice flat. Thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now. The name sent a chill through Ruby. Blackwell, the gang responsible for the shooting on her first day in Laredo. And miss all this fun. Blackwell's gaze shifted to Ruby, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Aren't you going to introduce me to your lady friend, Hayes? Sam moved slightly, positioning himself between Ruby and the newcomer. Miss Daniels isn't interested in making your acquaintance. Blackwell's smile never reached his eyes. Miss Daniels, is it? Abe's niece from back east. He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. Pleasure, madam. Jed Blackwell, at your service. Ruby inclined her head stiffly, unwilling to show fear despite the tension radiating from Sam beside her. Sheriff finally caught up to your brother, Sam said, drawing Blackwell's attention back to himself. Heard they're sending him to Huntsville. A flash of anger crossed Blackwell's face. For now, won't stay there long though. His hand drifted toward his holster. Some folks just can't mind their own business, get themselves into trouble that way. The sheriff approached, his hand resting casually on his own sidearm. Everything all right over here? Just getting acquainted with our new neighbor, Blackwell said, his voice deceptively pleasant. No law against that, is there, Sheriff? No law against it, the sheriff agreed, as long as you remember this is a peaceful gathering. Blackwell held up his hands in mock surrender. Wouldn't dream of disturbing the peace. He glanced at Sam again, his eyes hard. Some other time, Hayes. As Blackwell and his men moved toward the refreshment table, Ruby released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Who is he? She asked quietly. Trouble, Sam replied tersely. Runs a gang that's been terrorizing the area for months. Cattle rustling, robbery, worse. And the man you mentioned, his brother, got caught trying to rob the bank in Laredo, the shooting you witnessed your first day. Sam's expression was grim. Blackwell blames me for his brother's capture. I was the one who spotted him in town and alerted the sheriff. Ruby studied Sam's face, reading the tension in the set of his jaw. Will he come after you, eventually? Sam's eyes met hers. Which is why it's best if you're not seen with me too often. Don't want to make you a target. Ruby straightened her shoulders. I'm not afraid of men like Jed Blackwell. Maybe you should be. Sam's voice was soft but intense. I can handle Blackwell, been dealing with his kind most of my life. But you? I what? Ruby challenged. Sam shook his head, his expression troubled. You deserve better than to be caught in someone else's fight. Before Ruby could respond, the musicians struck up a lively tune and the dancing resumed. Sam remained by her side for the rest of the evening, his vigilance never wavering as he tracked Blackwell's movements across the room. When it came time to leave, Sam insisted on checking outside before allowing Ruby to exit the barn. The night had grown cool and he draped his coat over her shoulders as they rode back toward Laredo, the stars brilliant in the vast Texas sky above them. They rode in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ruby spoke. You're not what I expected when I came to Laredo. Sam glanced at her. What did you expect? I'm not sure, Ruby admitted, but not someone like you. Someone like me, Ruby struggled to put her feelings into words. Someone who quotes Dickens while fixing roof leaks. Someone who notices what I need before I know I need it. Sam was quiet for so long that Ruby thought he might not respond. Then he said, My life hasn't gone the way I expected either. As they approached Laredo, the building's dark silhouettes against the night sky, Sam slowed their pace. Ruby, he said, using her first name with a gentleness that made her heart skip. I meant what I said about Blackwell. He's dangerous, especially to anyone I. He hesitated, then continued, anyone I care about. Are you saying you care about me, Samuel Hayes? Ruby asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam reined his horse to a stop, turning in the saddle to face her. In the moonlight, his features were cast in silver and shadow, his blue eyes dark and serious. More than I should, he admitted. Which is why I need to stay away from you for a while. At least until the situation with Blackwell is resolved. Ruby felt a protest rising in her throat, but the determination in Sam's expression stopped her. How long is a while? She asked instead. Can't say. Sam's voice was heavy with regret. But I promise you this, I'll never be far, even if you don't see me. I'll make sure you're safe. The remainder of their ride passed in silence, the weight of Sam's words hanging between them. At the mercantile, he helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for the evening, Ruby said formally, trying to hide the confusion of emotions his declaration had stirred in her. And for introducing me to Daisy. She's a wonderful horse. Keep her, Sam said unexpectedly. At the livery. She's yours now, Sam. I couldn't possibly, please. His voice was rough with emotion. Let me do this much for you. In the shadows of the mercantile's entrance, with the town sleeping around them, Ruby made a decision. Rising on tiptoe, she pressed a soft kiss to Sam's cheek. Be careful, she whispered. Whatever trouble you're facing, remember you're not alone anymore. Sam's expression was unreadable as he stepped back, touching the brim of his hat in a silent farewell, before mounting his horse and riding away into the night. Ruby watched until he disappeared from view, her fingers touching the place where his coat still held the warmth of his body. Something had changed between them. Tonight a connection had formed that went beyond mere friendship or attraction. And somehow, she knew that despite his words, Samuel Hayes would not stay away for long. The mercantile opened on Monday morning to a steady stream of customers curious about both the new proprietress and the reopened store. Ruby found herself too busy to dwell on thoughts of Sam, though her eyes often strayed to the street outside, half expecting to see him despite his promise to stay away. By the end of the week, she had fallen into a routine, rising early to prepare the store, managing inventory and customers throughout the day, and keeping the books in the evening. Daisy, stabled at the livery, provided transportation for trips to outlying farms to deliver orders too bulky for customers to carry themselves. Though Sam kept his distance as promised, Ruby noticed signs of his continued watchfulness. A load of firewood appeared behind the store one morning. The hinges on the back door were oiled when they began to squeak. Miguel Fuentes, Sam's ranch hand, stopped by regularly to ask if she needed anything, his manner suggesting he was following instructions from his employer. "He's a good man, Senor Hayes," Miguel told her one afternoon as he helped load supplies for a delivery. "Stubborn but his heart, it is true." "You've worked for him long?" Ruby asked, trying to sound casual, "since he buy the ranch." Miguel secured a crate in the wagon. "Before that he was." The ranch hand hesitated, then shrugged. "It is not my story to tell. 2 weeks after the dance, Ruby was closing the store when the sheriff entered, his expression serious. "Evening, Miss Daniels," he greeted her. "Hate to bother you so late, but I thought you should know Jed Blackwell's brother escaped from custody during transfer to Huntsville. They're both in the area now, and word is they're looking to settle scores." Ruby felt a chill of apprehension. "Have you warned Sam?" The sheriff nodded. "Rode out to his place this morning. He's taking precautions." He studied her face for a moment. "Hayes asked me to keep an eye on you, said the Blackwells might try to get to him through people he cares about." "I can take care of myself," Ruby said automatically, though the thought of being targeted by the Blackwell gang was unsettling. "No doubt," the sheriff agreed, "but I promised Sam I'd look out for you. And in Laredo, we keep our promises." After the sheriff left, Ruby locked the store and climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind racing. Sam believed she might be in danger because of his feelings for her feelings he'd barely acknowledged, but which had been strong enough for him to distance himself for her protection. The following morning, Ruby made a decision. Closing the store for the day, she saddled Daisy and rode north toward the Hayes Ranch. If Sam wouldn't come to her, she would go to him. The countryside grew wilder as she left Laredo behind, the road narrowing to little more than a trail winding through mesquite and scrub oak. After nearly an hour's ride, Ruby crested a hill and saw the ranch spread below her, a modest house with a barn and corral, nestled against a backdrop of rolling hills. As she approached, a figure emerged from the barn, not Sam, but Miguel, who looked surprised to see her. "Senorita Daniels," he called, hurrying to take Daisy's reins as Ruby dismounted. "Is something wrong in town?" "Nothing's wrong," Ruby assured him. "I need to speak with Sam." Miguel's expression grew troubled. "El Patron, he is not here. Left before dawn to check the north pasture." He glanced at the sky where dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. "Should be back soon, though. Storm coming." Ruby looked toward the approaching clouds. "I'll wait for him." Miguel led her to the house, a simple structure built of stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Inside, the main room was sparsely but comfortably furnished with a stone fireplace as its focal point. "I will make coffee," Miguel offered, gesturing for Ruby to sit. "And perhaps you would like something to eat after your ride." While Miguel busied himself in the kitchen area, Ruby took the opportunity to look around. Unlike her uncle's cluttered living quarters, Sam's home was orderly, almost Spartan. A bookshelf held a surprising number of volumes, some clearly well-read judging by their worn bindings. A desk in the corner held papers, neatly stacked ranch accounts, perhaps. What caught her attention, however, was a framed sketch hanging beside the fireplace, a charcoal drawing of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. His mother, Miguel said, noticing Ruby's interest as he returned with coffee. Senor Hayes drew it himself. He has the artist's hand. He's talented, Ruby observed, studying the detailed portrait. Did you know her? Miguel shook his head. She died many years ago in Denver, I think. The sound of hoofbeats outside interrupted their conversation. Miguel moved to the window. It is the patron, he confirmed, then frowned. He is riding fast. Something is wrong. Ruby followed him onto the porch just as Sam galloped into the yard, rain beginning to fall from the darkening sky. He reined his horse to an abrupt stop when he saw her, surprise and alarm crossing his face. Ruby. He dismounted quickly, handing the reins to Miguel. What are you doing here? Is everything all right in town? Everything's fine, she assured him, suddenly uncertain of her decision to come. I needed to talk to you. Sam glanced at the approaching storm, then back at her. Let's get inside. We're in for some weather. As they entered the house, Miguel made a discreet exit, murmuring something about checking the livestock before the storm hit. Sam removed his wet coat and hat, running a hand through his damp hair. You shouldn't be here, he said without preamble. Not with Blackwell and his gang in the area. That's precisely why I came, Ruby replied. The sheriff told me about the escape. He also mentioned that you're concerned the Blackwells might target people you care about. Sam's jaw tightened. It's a possibility. If that's true, Ruby continued, finding courage in the urgency of the situation, then wouldn't I be safer here with you than alone in town? No, Sam said flatly. You'd be safer as far from me as possible. Outside, the storm broke in earnest, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. The sudden darkness made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Why are you so determined to push me away? Ruby demanded. Ever since the dance, you've been trying to protect you, Sam interrupted. Blackwell doesn't make idle threats. He's killed before, and he wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone associated with me. Because you helped capture his brother, Ruby pressed. Or is there more to it than that? Sam was silent for a long moment, his back to her as he stared out at the rain. Finally, he turned, his expression resolute. There's more, he admitted, but it's not a story that reflects well on me. Ruby moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. Tell me anyway. Sam gestured for her to sit, then paced the room, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. Before I came to Laredo, I was a lawman in Colorado, a marshal in a mining town called Silver Creek. He paused, his eyes meeting hers briefly before looking away. The Blackwell brothers were operating there too, running a protection racket among the miners. I was tasked with bringing them in. Thunder crashed outside, and the lamp on the table flickered, casting shifting shadows across Sam's troubled face. I tracked them for weeks, he continued. Finally cornered them in a canyon outside town. There was a shootout. I wounded Jed, but his brother got away. I brought Jed in to stand trial. That sounds like you were doing your job, Ruby observed. Sam shook his head. The trial never happened. A mob broke into the jail, dragged Blackwell out, and strung him up from the nearest tree. His voice grew harsh with self-recrimination. I should have stopped them. It was my responsibility to ensure he faced proper justice. A mob, Ruby echoed. How could you have stopped them alone? I wasn't alone, Sam said bitterly. I had deputies, but I wasn't at the jail that night. I was. He hesitated, then finished. I was celebrating my engagement. The revelation hit Ruby like a physical blow. You were engaged to the mayor's daughter. Sam's expression darkened with memory. While I was drinking champagne, Jed Blackwell was dying at the end of a rope. His brother arrived in town the next day, looking for revenge. Ruby sensed the story was approaching its most painful part. What happened? What Blackwell couldn't do to me, he did to her. Sam's voice was barely audible over the storm outside. Shot her on the steps of the church where we were to be married. She died in my arms. "Oh, Sam," Ruby whispered, her heart breaking for him. "I'm so sorry." After the funeral, I turned in my badge and left Colorado. Drifted south, ended up in Laredo. Sam looked at her directly now, his blue eyes intense. "So you see, Ruby, it's not just about Blackwell wanting revenge for his brother's arrest here. It goes back years, and he's already proven he'll target anyone I." He stopped, unable to continue. "Anyone you love," Ruby finished softly. Sam nodded once, his expression haunted. "I can't let that happen again. I won't." "So instead, you've sentenced yourself to a life of solitude." Ruby rose from her chair, moving toward him. "That's not living, Sam, that's just existing." "It's safer for everyone," he insisted. "Safer, perhaps, but right." Ruby shook her head. "The man I've come to know these past weeks, the man who quotes Dickens and fixes leaky roofs and notices what people need before they ask, that man deserves happiness." "Ruby," Sam began, but she cut him off. "No, listen to me." She reached for his hand, half expecting him to pull away. When he didn't, she continued. "What happened in Colorado was tragic, but it wasn't your fault. You can't spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for Blackwell's actions." Sam's fingers tightened around hers. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Ruby acknowledged. "But pushing away people who care about you won't bring your fiancé back, and it won't make Blackwell any less dangerous." They stood in silence for a moment, the storm raging outside while something equally powerful built between them in the quiet room. "You should stay until the storm passes," Sam finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's not safe to ride back to town in this weather." It wasn't a declaration of love, or even an admission that she was right. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that he wasn't sending her away. As evening fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. Miguel returned, soaked but reporting that all the livestock was secure. The three shared a simple meal, and afterwards, Miguel retired to his quarters in the barn, leaving Ruby and Sam alone in the house. "You can take my bed," Sam offered. "I'll sleep out here by the fire." Ruby nodded, suddenly shy in the intimacy of the quiet house. "Thank you." Sam's bedroom was as orderly as the rest of the house, with a sturdy bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table holding a lamp and a book, poetry by Tennyson. She noted with surprise. After changing into the shirt Sam had lent her to sleep in, Ruby lay in his bed, surrounded by his scent soap and leather and the faint tang of horses. Despite the comfort of the bed and her exhaustion from the day's events, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Sam's story, to the grief and guilt he had carried alone for so long. Eventually, she rose and moved to the door, intending to get a glass of water. Through the partially open door, she could see Sam sitting before the dying fire, his head in his hands. The vulnerability in his posture tugged at her heart. "Sam," she called softly, stepping into the main room. He looked up, quickly composing his features. "Everything all right?" Ruby nodded, crossing to sit beside him on the hearth rug. "Couldn't sleep? The storm keeping you awake?" Sam asked, his voice gentle. "No," Ruby admitted. "I was thinking about what you told me earlier about Colorado." Sam's expression closed slightly. "Shouldn't have burdened you with that." "It wasn't a burden," Ruby insisted. "It helps me understand you better." She hesitated, then added, "What was her name?" "Your fiancée?" "Sarah," Sam replied after a pause. "Sarah Mitchell." "Tell me about her," Ruby encouraged. "Not how she died, but who she was." Sam was silent for so long that Ruby thought he might refuse. Then, haltingly at first, he began to speak. He told her about Sarah's love of music, her skill with watercolors, her dream of seeing Paris someday. As he spoke, his voice grew warmer, the tension gradually easing from his shoulders. "She sounds wonderful," Ruby said when he finally fell silent. "She was." Sam stared into the glowing embers. "She deserved a long life, a chance to see Paris." Ruby reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "And you deserved a chance to build that life with her. I'm sorry you lost that opportunity." Sam turned to look at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "For a long time after I left Colorado, I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again. Didn't want to. Figured I'd spend the rest of my days on this ranch, growing old alone. And now," Ruby asked, her heart beating faster, "now I'm not so sure that's what I want anymore." Sam's gaze held hers. "Meeting you has changed things." The admission hung between them, full of possibility and uncertainty. Ruby felt herself drawn toward him, the pull between them as inevitable as gravity. When she leaned closer, Sam didn't pull away. Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as Sam's arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Ruby," Sam murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "I ain't worth the trouble. You should know that up front." Ruby placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palm. "You ain't the one deciding that," she replied firmly. A slow smile spread across Sam's face, the first genuine, unguarded smile she had seen from him. It transformed his features, erasing years of grief and guilt. "Stubborn woman," he said, his voice rich with affection. "So I've been told." Ruby smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been in years. They sat together before the dying fire, talking in low voices as the storm gradually subsided outside. When Ruby finally returned to the bedroom, it was with the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted between them, a barrier had fallen, allowing the possibility of a future neither had anticipated when Ruby first arrived in Laredo. The morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Ruby found Sam in the kitchen, preparing breakfast while Miguel tended to the horses outside. "Morning," Sam greeted her, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance, hair still tousled from sleep, wearing one of his shirts belted over her skirt. "Sleep well." "Eventually," Ruby replied with a smile that made his cheeks color slightly. The storm passed quickly. "Typical for this time of year," Sam said, setting plates on the table. "Quick and fierce, then gone." They ate breakfast together, making plans for Ruby's return to town. Despite the events of the previous night, Sam still insisted that she would be safer in Laredo, where the sheriff and his deputies could keep an eye on her. "I'll escort you back," he said as they cleared the dishes. "Make sure you arrive safely." "And then," Ruby asked, "will you disappear again?" Sam shook his head. "Not this time, but I still need to be cautious." He took her hand, his expression serious. "Blackwell's out there, Ruby. Until he's captured or dealt with, we need to be careful." Ruby understood the unspoken message. Until the threat was eliminated, any relationship between them would need to develop slowly, cautiously, away from public view. They rode back to Laredo together, Miguel accompanying them as added protection. The journey passed without incident, the countryside peaceful in the aftermath of the storm. At the edge of town, Sam reined in his horse. "I'll let you continue from here with Miguel," he said, his eyes scanning the streets ahead. "Less noticeable that way." Ruby nodded, understanding his caution. "When will I see you again?" "Soon," Sam promised. "In the meantime, keep your doors locked and don't go anywhere alone after dark." "I'll be careful," Ruby assured him, Sam glanced around to ensure they weren't observed, then leaned from his saddle to kiss her briefly. "I'll send word through Miguel when it's safe to meet." With that, he turned his horse and rode back the way they had come, leaving Ruby to enter Laredo with Miguel at her side. The next 2 weeks passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Ruby reopened the mercantile, conducting business as usual while remaining alert for any sign of the Blackwell brothers. The sheriff increased patrols around town, and Ruby often noticed one of his deputies lingering near the mercantile. True to his word, Sam sent messages through Miguel, brief notes delivered with supplies for the store. "All quiet at the ranch," one read. "Missing you," said another. Each message both reassured and frustrated Ruby, who longed for more than written words. On a busy Saturday afternoon, the store crowded with customers. Ruby was restocking the shelves when the bell over the door jingled. She turned with a welcoming smile that froze on her face when she saw who had entered Jed Blackwell, flanked by 2 of his men. "Afternoon, Miss Daniels," Blackwell drawled, removing his hat with mock courtesy. "Fine establishment you've got here." Ruby forced herself to remain calm, aware of the other customers who had fallen silent, watching the exchange with apprehension. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell." "What can I help you with today?" Blackwell sauntered toward the counter, his spurs jingling with each step. "Just picking up some supplies." His cold eyes surveyed the store. "Been meaning to pay you a visit for some time now." "We have a wide selection," Ruby replied evenly. "Please feel free to look around." One of the other customers, a rancher named Johnson, moved protectively closer to Ruby. "Need any help, Miss Daniels?" Blackwell's gaze sharpened. "The lady and I are just having a friendly conversation, Johnson. No need to interfere." The tension in the store was palpable as Blackwell's men began gathering items from the shelves: ammunition, tobacco, canned goods. Ruby watched them carefully, her heart racing despite her outward composure. "Been wondering," Blackwell said conversationally as he leaned against the counter, "how your friend Hayes is doing these days. Haven't seen him around town much." "Mr. Hayes comes and goes as his business requires," Ruby replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm sure you understand how demanding ranch work can be." Blackwell's smile never reached his eyes. "Oh, I understand Hayes better than most, I reckon. Man's got a history of hiding when things get difficult." Ruby refused to take the bait. "Will that be all for today, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked, gesturing to the items his men had placed on the counter. Blackwell studied her for a long moment, as if trying to determine how much she knew about Sam's past. Finally, he nodded. "For now." He placed coins on the counter. "Exact change," Ruby noted. "Been a pleasure, Miss Daniels." "I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." After Blackwell and his men departed, Johnson approached the counter. "You all right, Miss Daniels? Those men are trouble." "I'm fine, thank you," Ruby assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the coins in the register. "Just a customer like any other." "Not like any other," Johnson disagreed. "Blackwell's got a grudge against half the county and a special hatred for Sam Hayes." He lowered his voice. "Be careful. Word is, Blackwell doesn't just want Hayes dead, he wants him to suffer first." That evening, after closing the store, Ruby penned a quick note to Sam, describing Blackwell's visit. She gave the message to Eliza, who promised to have it delivered to the Hayes ranch first thing in the morning. Ruby had just finished preparing for bed when a soft knock sounded at the back door of the apartment. Grabbing her robe and a small pistol her father had insisted she learn to use, she approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" she called. "It's me," came Sam's voice, low and urgent. Ruby quickly unlocked the door, relief flooding through her as Sam stepped inside, his expression grim in the lamplight. "You got my message already?" she asked, surprised. "No message," Sam replied, removing his hat. Saw Blackwell and his men leaving town. Figured they might have paid you a visit. His eyes fell on the pistol in her hand. Good to see you're prepared. My father's influence, Ruby explained, setting the weapon aside. He believed women should know how to defend themselves. Sam nodded approvingly. Smart man. He looked around the apartment, checking the windows and locks. Tell me what happened with Blackwell. As Ruby recounted the encounter, Sam's expression darkened. He's getting bolder, he concluded when she finished. Testing the waters, seeing how close to you he can get. I don't think he knows about us, Ruby said. He was fishing for information about you, but he didn't make any direct threats. He didn't need to, Sam replied. His presence was the threat. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. This can't continue, Ruby. I won't have you living in fear because of me. What are you suggesting? Ruby asked, a note of apprehension in her voice. If you're thinking of leaving Laredo, not leaving, Sam interrupted. Ending it. This situation with Blackwell. His blue eyes met hers, hard with resolve. It's time to finish what started in Colorado. You mean confronting him? Ruby shook her head. That's exactly what he wants. It's too dangerous. More dangerous to wait until he decides to target you directly. Sam took her hands in his. I've spent years running from this, Ruby. Trying to escape my past, but it's caught up to me and now it's threatening you. I can't allow that. There must be another way, Ruby insisted. The sheriff has tried and failed to bring in the Blackwells for months, Sam finished. No, this is between Jed and me, always has been. Ruby studied his face, seeing the determination in the set of his jaw. What's your plan? I've sent for an old friend, Sam explained. Marshall from my Colorado days. Between us, we'll set a trap for Blackwell, but until then, I want you to stay with Eliza. Her house is on the edge of town, less isolated than the apartment here. Ruby wanted to argue, to insist that she could take care of herself, but the earnestness in Sam's expression stopped her. This wasn't just about her safety, it was about his need to protect her, to finally confront the guilt and grief that had driven him for so long. All right, she agreed finally. I'll stay with Eliza, but promise me you won't face Blackwell alone. I promise, Sam said, drawing her into his arms. I've got too much to live for now. The following day, Ruby moved temporarily to Eliza's comfortable home on the outskirts of Laredo. She continued to run the mercantile during daylight hours, but Miguel or one of the sheriff's deputies always escorted her between the store and Eliza's house. 3 days later, a stranger arrived in town, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose bearing instantly identified him as a lawman. Ruby watched from the mercantile window as he spoke briefly with the sheriff, then headed toward the saloon. That evening, Miguel arrived at Eliza's house with a message from Sam. Meet me at the church at midnight. Come through the back door. Tell no one. Is something happening? Ruby asked Miguel. The ranch hand nodded, his expression grave. Marshall Donovan arrived today. They make plans. He hesitated, then added, Be careful, señorita. The Blackwells, they have eyes everywhere. At 11:30, Ruby slipped out of Eliza's house, using the darkness for cover as she made her way to the small church at the edge of town. The streets were deserted, most of Laredo's citizens long since retired for the night. The back door of the church was unlocked, as Sam had promised. Inside, the sanctuary was dimly lit by a single lamp, the pews casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Ruby. Sam emerged from the shadows near the altar, his expression a mix of relief and concern. You weren't followed? No, she assured him, moving swiftly to his side. What's happening? Miguel mentioned a marshal. Robert Donovan, Sam confirmed. We served together in Colorado. He's been tracking the Blackwells ever since they fled south. He guided her to a pew. Sit down. "There's something you need to know." The seriousness of his tone alarmed Ruby. "What is it?" Sam sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "We've set a trap for Blackwell, using information Donovan brought with him. According to his sources, the gang is planning a major robbery, the payroll shipment arriving on tomorrow's stage from San Antonio." The silver mine payroll, Ruby realized. Everyone knows it's coming. The miners will be paid at the end of the week. Exactly, Sam nodded. Blackwell thinks we don't know about the plan. Donovan and the sheriff have arranged for extra guards, hidden ones. When Blackwell and his men make their move, they'll be surrounded. That sounds relatively safe, Ruby said cautiously, sensing there was more to the plan. Sam's grip on her hands tightened slightly. "There's a complication. Donovan believes there's an informant in town, someone feeding information to the Blackwells. We can't be sure who to trust, which is why I needed to see you in secret." "What do you need me to do?" Ruby asked without hesitation. "Tomorrow morning, I want you to announce that you're closing the store early, say you're feeling unwell. Then I need you to leave town visibly, riding toward my ranch." Sam's expression was deadly serious. "Blackwell has been watching you. He'll assume you're going to warn me about the payroll, which will confirm his suspicion that I don't know about the robbery plan." "You're using me as bait," Ruby concluded, a chill running through her. "Not exactly," Sam replied. "You won't be in any real danger. Miguel will be watching from a distance, and you'll only ride far enough to be seen leaving town. Then you'll circle back to Eliza's house and stay there until it's over." Ruby considered the plan, seeing its logic despite her concerns. "And what will you be doing during all this?" "Waiting with Donovan and the sheriff's men near the stage depot." Sam's eyes hardened. "When Blackwell makes his move, we'll be ready." "It's dangerous," Ruby said quietly. "Yes," Sam acknowledged. "But it's our best chance to end this, to be free of the shadow Blackwell has cast over both our lives." Ruby reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." Sam turned his head to press a kiss into her palm. "When this is over, Ruby, I want us to have a real chance without looking over our shoulders, without fear." "That's what I want too," she whispered. They remained in the church for another hour, finalizing details of the plan. When it was time for Ruby to return to Eliza's house, Sam insisted on escorting her partway, keeping to the shadows until they reached the edge of town. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice rough with emotion as they prepared to part. "After it's over, I'll come for you." Ruby rose on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring all her fear and hope into the embrace. "I'll be waiting." The following morning dawned clear and hot, a typical Texas summer day. Ruby opened the mercantile at the usual time, going through the motions of business while her mind raced with thoughts of the coming confrontation. At noon, as planned, she began complaining of a headache to her customers. By 1 o'clock, she had posted a sign on the door announcing the store would close early due to the proprietress's indisposition. At 2, Ruby saddled Daisy at the livery, making sure her preparations were observed by several townsfolk. "Just need some fresh air," she explained to the livery owner. "Thought I'd ride out to the Hayes Ranch for a while." As she rode out of town, Ruby felt eyes watching her, not just curious townspeople, but someone else, someone whose gaze held malice rather than concern. She kept to a steady pace, not too fast to arouse suspicion, heading north on the road toward Sam's ranch. Once she was certain she had been seen leaving town, Ruby followed the plan, circling through a grove of trees and doubling back toward Eliza's house by a roundabout route. Miguel appeared briefly on a ridge overlooking her path, signaling that all was well before disappearing again. By 4 o'clock, Ruby was safely ensconced in Eliza's parlor, the older woman having been briefed on the plan by the sheriff himself. "Now we wait," Eliza said, pouring tea with hands that trembled slightly. "And pray." The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Eliza tried to distract Ruby with conversation and card games, but Ruby found it impossible to focus on anything except the danger Sam was facing. "He's a capable man," Eliza said gently, noticing Ruby's distress. "And he has good men with him." "I know," Ruby replied, staring out the window at the lengthening shadows. "But Blackwell has evaded capture for so long." The sound of distant gunfire interrupted her words, several shots in rapid succession, followed by shouting that carried faintly on the evening air. Ruby was on her feet instantly, moving toward the door. Eliza caught her arm. "You promised Sam you'd stay here," she reminded her firmly. "I know," but Ruby began, only to be cut off by more gunfire, closer this time, followed by the thunder of hoofbeats on the road outside. The two women froze, listening intently. The riders passed Eliza's house without slowing, heading south out of town at a gallop. "Could be some of Blackwell's men fleeing," Eliza suggested, her voice tight with tension. "Or it could be the sheriff in pursuit," Ruby countered, her imagination conjuring dire possibilities. The minutes stretched into an hour, then two, with no word from town. Darkness fell, and still they waited, jumping at every sound outside the house. Finally, just as the mantel clock struck 9, a knock came at the door. Eliza grabbed her shotgun from beside the fireplace before cautiously approaching the entrance. "Who is it?" she called. "Deputy Miller, madam," came the reply. "Sheriff sent me to fetch Miss Daniels." Ruby's heart lurched. "Is Sam? He's at the doctor's house," the deputy said as Eliza opened the door. "Asked for you specifically, Miss Daniels." The word doctor sent a wave of fear through Ruby. "Is he badly hurt?" "Took a bullet in the shoulder," Miller replied, his expression grim. "Doc says he'll live, but he's lost a lot of blood." "I'll saddle the buggy," Eliza said, already reaching for her shawl. The ride to the doctor's house seemed interminable, though it was only at the other end of town. Ruby's mind filled with terrible images of Sam bleeding, dying, calling her name while she sat helplessly at Eliza's house. When they finally arrived, the doctor's wife met them at the door. "He's asking for you," she told Ruby, leading her through the house to a back room that served as a surgery. Sam lay on a narrow bed, his face pale against the white pillowcase. His left shoulder was heavily bandaged, and a blanket covered the rest of his body. His eyes were closed, but they opened when Ruby approached the bedside. "You're supposed to be at Eliza's," he said, his voice weak but tinged with a hint of his usual dryness. Relief flooded through Ruby at the sound of his voice. "And you're supposed to be careful," she countered, taking his right hand in hers. A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. "Tried my best." His eyes searched her face. "You're all right, I'm fine," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "What happened?" "Ambush," Sam replied, wincing as he shifted slightly. "Blackwell figured out it was a trap, had men positioned on the rooftops." He closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Marshal Donovan took one in the leg. Sheriff's deputy was killed." Ruby felt sick at the news. "And Blackwell?" "Dead," Sam said simply. "So is his brother. It's over, Ruby." The doctor entered then, shooing Ruby aside to check Sam's bandages. "He needs rest," he told her sternly. "You can see him again in the morning." "I'm staying," Ruby stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. The doctor looked as if he might object, but something in Ruby's expression made him relent. "Fine. But don't tire him out with talking." After the doctor left, Ruby pulled a chair close to the bed, still holding Sam's hand. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You came back to me." "Always will," Sam murmured, his eyes already closing as exhaustion claimed him. Always. Ruby sat vigil through the night, dozing occasionally but never leaving Sam's side. By morning his color was better and the doctor pronounced him on the road to recovery. "Keep him quiet for at least a week," he instructed Ruby. "No riding, no lifting, and absolutely no exertion of any kind. The bullet missed anything vital, but he lost enough blood to weaken him considerably." "I'll make sure he follows orders," Ruby promised. When the doctor suggested Sam should remain at the surgery for a few more days, Ruby shook her head. "I'm taking him home, to his ranch," the doctor asked doubtfully. "That's hardly practical in his condition." "No," Ruby replied. "To the mercantile, I can care for him there." Sam, who had been listening to this exchange with growing amusement, finally spoke up. "Don't I get a say in this?" "No," Ruby told him firmly. "You lost that privilege when you got yourself shot." With the help of Miguel and Thomas Wilson, Sam was transported to the apartment above the mercantile later that day. Ruby closed the store indefinitely, placing a sign on the door that simply read, "Reopening in 1 week." For the next several days, Ruby devoted herself to Sam's care. She changed his bandages, prepared nourishing meals, and made sure he took the medicine the doctor had prescribed for pain and to prevent infection. Sam proved to be a surprisingly cooperative patient, perhaps because recovery meant spending his days in Ruby's company, watching her move about the apartment with growing familiarity and affection. "You don't have to keep the store closed on my account," he said one afternoon as Ruby read to him from one of her uncle's books. "I'm perfectly capable of looking after myself for a few hours." "I know," Ruby replied, marking her place in the book, "but I want to be here with you." She smiled. "Besides, Eliza and some of the other ladies are taking turns manning the store for a few hours each day. Seems I've been adopted by the women of Laredo." Sam's expression grew serious. "What about after I've recovered? You planning to stay in Laredo?" Ruby set the book aside, studying his face. "That depends," she said carefully. "On what? On whether I have a reason to stay." She held his gaze steadily. "Do I, Sam?" Sam reached for her hand, drawing her closer to the bed. "Ruby Daniels, I've spent years running from my past, convinced I didn't deserve happiness after what happened in Colorado." His blue eyes were clear and direct. "You changed that, made me believe in second chances." Ruby's heart quickened at the earnestness in his voice. "Is that a reason to stay?" "It's the beginning of one." Sam's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "When I'm back on my feet, I'd like to court you properly if you're amenable." Ruby laughed softly. "Samuel Hayes, I've nursed you through a gunshot wound, read Dickens to you until my voice gave out, and even cut your hair when you complained it was too long. I think we're well past the formal courting stage." A smile spread across Sam's face, the open, unguarded smile that still made Ruby's breath catch. "What stage would you say we're at then?" In answer, Ruby leaned down and kissed him gently. "The stage where you tell me you love me," she murmured against his lips. "I love you," Sam said without hesitation. "Have since you stood in the middle of a gunfight your first day in Laredo and didn't flinch." Ruby smiled, her heart full to bursting. "I love you too, Samuel Hayes, even when you're being stubborn about not being worth the trouble." By the following week, Sam was strong enough to move around the apartment with the aid of a walking stick. Ruby reopened the mercantile full-time, though she still closed early to spend evenings with Sam. News of their relationship had spread through Laredo with the speed that only small-town gossip can achieve. Most reactions were positive approval that the solitary rancher and the newcomer shopkeeper had found happiness together. Marshal Donovan, recovering from his own wound at the sheriff's house, paid them a visit before returning to Colorado. "Never thought I'd see the day," he commented to Ruby while Sam was resting. After what happened with Sarah, Sam shut down completely, wouldn't let anyone close. He studied Ruby with respectful curiosity. Must be something special about you, Miss Daniels. Or something special about Sam, Ruby countered. Not many men would have survived what he did and still maintained their capacity for kindness. Donovan nodded thoughtfully. You might be right about that. He rose to leave, tipping his hat to her. Take good care of him. Men like Sam Hayes are rare in this world. I intend to, Ruby assured him. As Sam's strength returned, they began discussing their future more concretely. Ruby had grown to love the mercantile and her role in the community, while Sam's ranch was prospering under his careful management. It's not practical for you to run the store and live at the ranch, Sam observed one evening as they sat on the small balcony overlooking the street. Too much riding back and forth. True, Ruby agreed. And I can hardly expect you to give up ranching to become a shopkeeper. They contemplated this logistical problem in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and gold. I could build a house, Sam said suddenly. Halfway between town and the ranch, close enough for you to reach the mercantile easily but still on my land. Ruby considered the idea. That might work, but it would still mean daily travel for one of us. Or, Sam continued, his voice taking on an almost casual tone, we could divide our time. Winters at the ranch when business is slower, summers here in town when both the store and the ranch need the most attention. 2 homes, Ruby raised an eyebrow. That sounds rather extravagant, Mr. Hayes. Sam turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. Only if we share them, as husband and wife. The simple proposal, delivered without preamble or flowery speech, was so quintessentially Sam that Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. Are you asking me to marry you, Samuel Hayes? I am, he confirmed, his blue eyes serious. Not the most romantic proposal, I know, it's perfect, Ruby interrupted. And yes, I'll marry you on one condition. Sam raised an eyebrow. Which is? That you never again tell me you aren't worth the trouble. Ruby squeezed his hands. Because you are, Sam. You're worth everything. Their wedding took place 6 weeks later in the same church where they had met to plan the trap for Blackwell. The entire town turned out for the ceremony. The mercantile closed for the day with a sign that read, "Gone to get married. Back tomorrow." Eliza wept openly during the vows, while Miguel stood proudly as Sam's best man. The sheriff gave the bride away, stepping in for the father who couldn't be there. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sam kissed Ruby with a tenderness that spoke of all they had overcome to reach this moment. As they walked back down the aisle together, Ruby caught a glimpse of the future stretching before them, a future built on love, trust, and the second chance they had given each other. In the years that followed, their plan to divide their time between the ranch and town proved successful. Ruby maintained the mercantile, which prospered under her management, while Sam expanded his ranch holdings, eventually becoming one of the most respected cattlemen in the region. Their first child, a son they named Abraham, after Ruby's uncle was born a year after their marriage. A daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, named for both the woman Sam had lost and the friend who had brought them together. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Sam presented Ruby with a surprise, a portrait he had drawn of their family, rendered with the same skill he had once used to capture his mother's likeness. You never cease to amaze me, Samuel Hayes, Ruby said, admiring the detailed artwork. 5 years of marriage, and I'm still discovering new talents of yours. Sam wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on her shoulder as they gazed at the portrait together. Plenty of time for more discoveries, he murmured. We've got the rest of our lives ahead of us. As they stood together in the home they had built halfway between town and ranch, exactly as Sam had proposed that evening on the balcony, Ruby reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From her arrival during a gunfight to the confrontation with Blackwell, from Sam's injury to their wedding day, their path had never been easy. But looking at their children playing in the yard outside, at the life they had created together, Ruby knew that every challenge had been worthwhile. Samuel Hayes had indeed been worth all the trouble, and she would spend the rest of her days making sure he never forgot it.